I found out my parents emptied my trust fund on my 21st birthday. Not by accident, not in some vague, confusing way. I found out because I walked into the bank with my ID, wearing the dress my mom had bought me for my big day, and the woman behind the desk looked at her screen, then at me, and said, "There's nothing here." My name is Elise. I grew up being told that turning 21 would change my life, not because of bars or legal drinks or any of that, because of the fund. That's what my parents called it, the fund. My grandfather, on my dad's side, set it up when I was born. He owned a small plumbing supply company and, according to family lore, had made smart investments before he died. One of those smart investments was a trust in my name. I didn't understand what that meant as a kid. I just knew that whenever we were short on money, which was often, my mother would sigh dramatically and say, "If only we could touch Elisa's fund." But no, your grandfather had to be controlling even from the grave. The trust was locked until I turned 21. Legally, no one could access it before then without jumping through a lot of hoops. "No touching until you're an adult," my dad used to say, wiggling his fingers like he was resisting temptation. Grandpa wanted you to have a head start. College, a house deposit, something big. You're lucky, you know? Lucky. That's what they called me when the rent was late and they blamed the fund for not being available to bail them out. Lucky when I watched my mother pay for groceries with 3 different cards to see which one would go through. Lucky when my dad's car got repossessed and he yelled at my mom for spoiling me instead of yelling at himself for missing payments. "You don't know how good you have it," she'd say. "That money is just sitting there while we struggle." It never felt good. It felt heavy. Like I was walking around with a backpack full of bricks I wasn't allowed to open. When I turned 18, the trustee, a man named Mr. Carver from a firm my grandfather had picked, sat me down in his office. He slid a folder across the desk. "This is the most recent statement," he said. "You can't access the principal until your 21st birthday, per the trust language, but you should know what exists in your name." I opened it with shaking hands. There were numbers on that page my brain had trouble processing. Not millions, but more than my parents had ever had at once. Enough that if I was careful, I could pay for school, or a small condo, or at least a real shot at not living paycheck to paycheck. Carver was kind but firm. "Your grandparents wanted this to be a foundation, not a cushion," he said. "You'll be tempted to see it as endless. It isn't. And until you are legally allowed to manage it, I am responsible for guarding it." He glanced at me over his glasses. "And for guarding you from people who might see it as their solution," he added. I knew what he meant. I also knew he didn't know my parents as well as I did. That day, walking home, I made a decision. If my parents were going to keep treating my future like a lottery ticket, I was going to quietly protect myself. I started recording important conversations. Anytime they brought up the fund, I opened an app on my phone and hit record. At first, it was just for my own sanity. Proof that I hadn't made up the things they said. I had no idea those recordings would become the only reason my 21st birthday didn't end with my entire future quietly flushed away. Because while my parents spent years complaining that they couldn't get to my money early, they'd also been working on another plan. One that depended on me never checking the numbers myself. One that depended on me trusting them. They didn't know I was listening as closely as I was. They definitely didn't know I had every call saved. Money, in our house, was a ghost we all pretended not to see. Bills disappeared from the counter the way leftovers did. One day they were there, the next day they weren't. Sometimes that meant my mother had pulled off another miracle and paid them. Sometimes it meant they'd gone to collections, whatever that meant. We never talked about it directly. We talked around it. "Things are tight. Next month will be better. Your father's boss is a jerk. The hospital overcharges." There was always a story, always a villain that wasn't us. When I was little, I believed them. When I got older, I started noticing patterns, like how my dad always somehow had money for lottery tickets and beer, even when there wasn't enough for my field trip. Or how my mom could spend an entire afternoon on the phone with her sister complaining about debt, but somehow never stayed on hold long enough to set up a payment plan. The only solid thing about our finances, apparently, was my trust. The fund is safe, at least, my mom would say. Like that was both a comfort and an insult. It became our family's taboo topic. Anytime I brought it up, usually when I was panicking about college loans or rent, my parents would shut me down. That money isn't for now, my dad would say. It's for when you're really an adult. You'll blow it if you get your hands on it too early. Yes, because clearly we're the irresponsible ones, my mother would mutter. When I got my first part-time job at 16 scooping ice cream, they demanded a cut. 10% to the house, my dad said. It's only fair. You live here. It should go into savings, I said. I'm trying to build something for when I move out. He rolled his eyes. Stop acting like a martyr, he said. We fed you for 16 years. You can contribute now. I handed over the crumpled cash. I also, quietly, opened my own account at a different bank and started siphoning money into it. Not much. 20 here, 50 there. But it was mine. Untouched. By the time I turned 18, I had enough to cover books for my first year of college. I showed my mother the statement, proud. Her face tightened. What, you don't trust us? She asked. That's not it, I said quickly. I just wanted some independence. The trust isn't accessible yet. She scoffed. The trust, she said, mocking my grandfather's careful wording. You think that lawyer loves you more than we do? You think some old man in an office knows what's best for you? Mr. Carver was barely 50, but to my mother, any man in a suit was old. He's following what Grandpa wanted, I said. And what about what we want, she shot back. We're the ones raising you. We know what you need now, not someone who's dead. There it was. The real resentment. Not that the trust existed, that it was out of their reach. Right around then is when I started recording. The first time it happened by accident. My phone was already in my hand when my dad launched into a speech about how I should let him handle the trust because he understood finances. I hit the little red button almost without thinking. Later, replaying it in my room, I realized how different their words sounded when I wasn't in the moment trying to respond. They weren't just venting. They were rehearsing arguments, getting me used to certain phrases. Family money. We're all in this together. What's the point of you having money if your parents are drowning? They called Mr. Carver the gatekeeper, called my grandfather controlling, called me selfish when I suggested waiting until the original terms kicked in. You're not even an adult yet, my mother said when I was 19 and suggested meeting with Carver alone. You don't know how the world works. If I wasn't an adult, I thought, why were they already leaning so hard on the idea that I should save them? Mr. Carver, for his part, stayed professional. Anytime my parents called his office with questions, he copied me on emails. Per the trust document, distributions cannot be made prior to Elisa's 21st birthday without court approval, he wrote, more than once. I strongly advise against attempting to alter these terms. He might as well have waved a red flag in front of them. They didn't like being told no, especially not by someone whose job it was to say it. So they started trying a different tactic. Me. Do you really want some stranger in a suit controlling everything? My dad asked one night over dinner. All he cares about fees. We're your parents. We care about you. So does the person who set it up, I said. Grandpa wanted this for me. And we're telling you we know better how to use it, my mom said. You want to go to college without debt? You want a car? We can help you if you let us manage it. Let us manage it. Such a harmless-sounding phrase. What they meant was, sign over enough authority that we can get to the money. I smiled, nodded, said we'd talk about it closer to my birthday. Then I went to my room and backed up my recordings to the cloud. Paranoid? Maybe. But living in a house where everyone pretends obvious lies are just differences of opinion will do that to you. The 6 months leading up to my 21st felt like a sales pitch, except I was the only target. Think about how much easier life will be, my mother said on the phone one afternoon, her voice syrupy sweet. If we consolidate everything, one plan, one family budget, your trust could wipe out the credit cards. We'd all be starting fresh. All, as in them, not me. I already paid my own bills, scraped through classes with a part-time campus job and a cheap room in a shared house. I had plans for the trust, not wild ones. Finish school without drowning in debt, maybe buy a tiny condo instead of renting forever. Have a cushion so every broken laptop didn't feel like the end of the world. I want to talk to Mr. Carver first, I said. She sighed dramatically. Haven't you figured it out yet? She said. He works for your grandfather's memory, not for you. We're the ones who are here. We're the ones who know what's best. I opened my note app and tapped their words out as she said them, in case the recording failed. We're the ones who know what's best. We're in this together. All for one, one for all. It sounded noble. It wasn't. My dad tried a different angle. Interest rates are crazy right now, he said on another call. If we move your trust into a different vehicle, we can grow it faster. I've been reading about this stuff. Dad, you overdraw your checking account once a month, I said gently. Maybe we let the professional handle it. That's rude, he snapped. You think I'm stupid? Yes, I thought. Out loud, I said, I think Grandpa chose Carver for a reason. They pushed. I resisted. It became a cold war with hot flashes. I stopped going home for random weekends because every visit turned into a strategy session about my money. They started guilt-tripping me for not wanting to be part of the family. Once you're 21, my mother said during one particularly tense call, you're going to see how hard it is out here. You'll be begging us to help you manage it then. No, I said, I won't. The week before my birthday, they started acting weirdly nice. Too many texts. How's your day? We're so proud of you. Your father and I are excited to see what you do with your future. One night, my mother called and didn't mention the trust at all. She asked about my classes, my friends, my work. It felt almost normal. Before we hung up, she said, by the way, don't forget to call Carver and set up an appointment for after your birthday. He'll need to go over everything. I already did, I said. He said to come in next week. She paused. He did? She asked. Yes, I said. Why? Oh, nothing, she said quickly. Just making sure you're on top of it. I didn't think much of it in the moment. I thought she was finally backing off, letting the trust do what it was supposed to. Looking back, I know that call wasn't about letting go. It was about checking the timeline, seeing how much of a head start they had. On the morning of my birthday, I woke up to 3 texts from my parents. A cake emoji. We love you. Can't believe our baby is 21. Not one mention of the trust. I got ready, feeling weirdly calm. This was it. The day my grandfather's brick-filled backpack finally opened. After class, I went straight to the bank. Carver's office was on the 2nd floor. He greeted me with that same measured smile. Happy birthday, Elise, he said. Ready for the grand tour of your finances? More than ready, I said. We sat. He pulled up my file. His brow furrowed. That's odd, he murmured. My stomach dropped. What? I asked. Odd how? He clicked a few times, then leaned back, shaking his head slowly. As of last month, he said, the trust has been fully distributed. Distributed to who? I asked, though a cold little part of me already knew. He met my eyes. To your parents, he said, per a court order. I felt my ears ringing. Court order? I repeated. I wasn't. How? He slid a copy of the document across the desk. My name was on it. My signature. Except it wasn't mine. Not the way my hand moved. Not the way my E curved. I knew that scrawl. I'd watched it on permission slips and checks my whole life. My father's. For a few seconds, I couldn't make sense of the page. The words swam. Petition for early distribution of trust assets. guardian consent, best interests of the beneficiary, my father's name as petitioner, my name in the slot labeled minor child, even though I was 19 at the time the document was dated. It looks like they filed when you were still under 21, Carver said quietly, argued that holding the funds in trust was doing more harm than good given the family's financial situation. Harm to who? I croaked. He pressed his lips together. The petition frames it as stress on your parents affecting your emotional well-being, he said. The court appears to have accepted that argument. My parents had always been stressed. That was nothing new. Apparently, they'd managed to turn their own chaos into a weapon. I wasn't notified, I said. Nobody told me there was a hearing. You should have been, he said, under normal circumstances. But the paperwork claims they couldn't reliably contact you and that you trusted your parents to handle the matter. Trusted? The irony almost made me laugh. They forged my signature, I said, pointing at the shaky scribble. We can't say that yet, Carver replied. We can say it doesn't match your signature on file here. He pulled up another document. My original trust acknowledgement, signed at 18. The difference was obvious, even to someone who didn't live with the man who'd signed the other one. An anger so sharp it felt clean rose up through the shock. They hadn't just stolen my money. They'd lied to a judge, used my name as a crowbar. How long have you known? I asked Carver. About 10 minutes, he said, when you walked in and I pulled up the latest details. I was under the impression the trust was intact. Last year's statement still showed a healthy balance. The distribution happened very recently. He tapped the screen. 3 weeks ago, he said. 3 weeks. Right around the time my mother started being extra nice. Right before that strange call where she checked if I'd made an appointment. I felt sick. What happens now? I asked. He leaned forward. That depends, he said. Do you want to pursue this? I want my money back, I said, and I want them to stop acting like my life is their safety net. He nodded. Then we start by getting all the records, he said. Court filings, transfer details, and anything you have that shows you did not consent. My hand went automatically to my bag, to the phone tucked inside. I have recordings, I said. He blinked. Recordings? He repeated. Of calls, I said. Every time they brought up the trust, every time they pressured me. They never told me they were going to court. They never said a judge was involved. He sat back, a slow smile creeping across his face. Elise, he said, your grandfather would be very proud of your paranoia. We spent the next hour reviewing what I had. I pulled up files on my phone, notes with dates and summaries. He took notes of his own. May I have copies? He asked. Yes, I said, as many as you need. I left his office with a folder of photocopies, a knot of dread in my stomach, and a strange, fierce clarity. They had lied, on paper, in court, to my face. And they had done it assuming I would never see the trail they left. They didn't know I had every "we're in this together" recorded. They didn't know I had them on tape saying, we'll just move things around. You don't need to know the details. They didn't know the judge who had signed off on their petition might see a very different side of the story if he heard their late-night calls. On the bus home, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Happy birthday, baby! Call us when you're free so we can celebrate properly. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For once, I didn't reply. I needed time. To process, to plan. Trust, I was realizing, wasn't just about money. It was about what you do when you find out the people who were supposed to protect you have been quietly chiseling away at your foundation for years. Confronting your parents about stealing your trust fund is not something they put in any how to be an adult handbook. I didn't storm into their house. I didn't scream over the phone. I started with the paper. Carver filed a motion to reopen the case. He attached affidavits. He attached my original signature. He attached my statement that I had never been told about the petition, never consented to early distribution, never seen a dime of the money. He also, with my permission, mentioned the existence of recorded conversations. Courts are not always friendly to secretly recorded calls, he cautioned. but knowing they exist can shift how people behave. In parallel, he requested a breakdown from the bank that had held the trust. Where had the money gone? The answer was depressingly predictable. Chunks to credit cards, a back mortgage payment, a car loan, smaller transfers to my parents' checking account labeled household expenses. Nothing that even pretended to benefit me directly. No tuition, no investment in my name. Just years of financial mismanagement swept under a rug made of my grandfather's careful planning. When the judge scheduled a hearing on Carver's motion, my parents panicked. I know, because they called. A lot. The first call I didn't answer. On the second day, after my mother's fifth voicemail, I picked up. "Elise," she said, "we've been trying to reach you. Mr. Carver is saying some crazy things. Something about court. We need to talk." "We will," I said, in front of the judge. She scoffed. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "We're family. We don't need to drag strangers into this." "You already did," I replied, "when you lied to one." There was a pause. "We didn't lie," she said, voice sharpening. "We just expedited things. That money was wasting away. We used it to keep a roof over your head, to pay for food. You benefited." "I was living in a dorm when most of those payments were made," I said. "The bank records show it. This wasn't about me. It was about you not wanting to change your habits." My father got on the line. "Elise, we're your parents," he said. "We did what we had to do. You think your grandpa wanted us out on the street while your trust sat there?" "I think he wanted me to have a chance not to live like you," I said softly. He took that as an insult. Maybe it was. Maybe it needed to be. At the hearing, they tried the same tactics they'd used the first time. Tears, talk of hard times, of doing our best. They painted a picture of themselves as noble martyrs who had sacrificed everything for their only child. Carver, calm as ever, slid the recordings across the metaphorical table. He played selected clips. My mother saying, "We'll pay it back when we get our tax refund. She doesn't need to know." My father saying, "We'll say we talked to her and she agreed. They'll never check." The judge's expression changed, from polite neutrality to something colder. "You understand," he said to my parents, "that this court relies on truthful representations from petitioners. Had this information been available at the initial hearing, the outcome might have been quite different." My mother cried. My father tried to argue. "Those were private conversations," he said. "She had no right." "She had every right," the judge cut in, "to protect her interests when presented with evidence that those entrusted with them may have misused their position." In the end, the judge didn't wave a magic wand and conjure the money back. Real life isn't that clean. But he did order restitution. My parents were now legally obligated to repay the trust over time. He also referred the matter to the state's attorney for possible charges related to forging my signature and making false statements. "Given the amount and the circumstances, we will consider alternatives to incarceration," he said, "but this court cannot ignore what has occurred." Outside the courthouse, my mother turned on me. "You ruined us," she hissed. "You humiliated us. All this over money?" "No," I said. "All this over trust. The money was just how I finally proved what you've been doing my whole life." Some relatives called me cold, said I'd thrown my parents under the bus. Others, quietly, said, "I wish I'd done what you did when my dad drained my college fund." If you've ever been the lucky one with a fund or an account your family treats like a community pool, you know this guilt dance. They tell you you're selfish for wanting control. They call you ungrateful when you hesitate to hand them the keys. They talk about love while filling out forms in your name. Those recordings didn't just save me financially. They saved me from gaslighting myself into thinking I'd imagined their manipulation. Because when you hear your own mother say, "She'll get over it, she always does," on a loop, it's a lot harder to convince yourself this was just a misunderstanding. If any of this sounds uncomfortably familiar, if some part of you is thinking about secret conversations and unlogged withdrawals, let this be your permission slip. You are not crazy for wanting receipts. You are not evil for documenting. You are not disloyal for protecting what was meant for you. Life after the trust fund disaster wasn't neat. My parents didn't suddenly become honest, fiscally responsible people. They became careful around me. We don't talk about money now, at all. When my mother starts to complain about bills, I say, I hope you find a good solution, and change the subject. I don't send little help transfers anymore. I don't let we're all in this together phrases slide. The restitution schedule is between them and the court. The trust is back under Carver's guard, with extra protections in place. I can't pretend I got every cent back. Some of it is gone, evaporated into interest and fees and the realities of their choices. But I got something else: clarity. Before my 21st, I lived in a fog of, are we struggling because life is hard or because they make it harder, with no proof either way. Now I have proof, not just in bank statements, in their own voices, saying over and over that my future was optional if it made their present easier. That changes how you see everything. Family dinners, when I do go, feel different, smaller. I don't stay overnight. I don't leave important mail in their house when I visit. I don't log into any accounts on their Wi-Fi. Paranoid? Maybe. But paranoia for me is just a word for once bitten, never funding someone else's mistakes again. I finished school using a mix of scholarship, part-time work, and what remained of the trust once it was righted. I still live modestly, not because I'm scared, because I like knowing my rent is paid with money no one else has a claim to. I started seeing a therapist who specializes in adult kids of financially chaotic parents. She asked me, what would it look like if you stopped seeing yourself as their safety net? I thought about it. About all the times my mother had said, we're counting on you. About all the times my dad had joked, you'll take care of us when we're old, right? You've got that fancy fund. It would look like this, I said. Me paying my own bills, them paying theirs. And if they don't, that's not automatically my emergency. It's still a work in progress. Guilt is a stubborn stain. Sometimes, when my phone buzzes late at night with my mother's name, I feel that old urge to answer, to fix, to empty myself out so they can be full. Then, I remember the bank teller saying, there's nothing here. I remember that sick, sinking feeling. And I think, never again. If you're here because you've had your own version of that moment, whatever it looked like, a trust fund, an inheritance, a college account with your name on it, you're not alone. There are so many of us who grew up being told we were lucky because someone before us tried to protect us, only to watch the people closest to us chip away at those protections. Sometimes the only way to honor the person who set that safety up is to defend it, even if that means standing up to people with your last name, even if that means being called cold or ungrateful, even if that means you walk away with less money than you should have, but more self-respect than you ever thought you could have. If stories like this make you feel a little less alone and a little more justified in drawing hard lines around your life, stay. Next time, I want to tell you about a woman whose parents tried to spend her entire inheritance for the good of the family, only to find out the trust manager had quietly named her the true owner. Spoiler, they did not like what the paperwork had to say.